Good morning. My name is Mark Benthien. I am the Executive Director of the Earthquake Country Alliance. And we are joined today by some great panelists who will be presenting on our topic of what we would do if an earthquake were to happen now, concurrent disasters, and to the current pandemic, of course, but also how we can be being prepared for earthquakes still at the same time. I'm just wanting to confirm that, again, if you missed this first slide, you will be on mute. Your video won't be seen. This is a Zoom webinar, and you want to adjust your settings as here. Go to view options, and the best way to see both the presenters and the presentation is to be in side-by-side mode. Also, you can use the chat to share information, respond to discussions, and communicate with panelists, and click the Q&A to post questions for the panelists. And this presentation, all the presentations today will be available, as well as a full recording within a day or so on the website that you may have used to register, and we'll be sending a link out to you all as well. With that, I'd like to introduce the Earthquake Country Alliance Bay Area co-chairs, Dina Gunning and Daniel Holmesy. If you could both just introduce yourself, and then Dina, you'll go through the slides.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. Wish we could all see you in person, but welcome to our first virtual Earthquake Country Alliance regional workshop. Again, Dina Gunning. I'm one of the co-chairs of the ECA Bay Area Coordinating Committee, and I'm also the Community Risk and Resiliency Specialist for the Central County Fire Department, serving Burlingame, Hillsborough, and Millbrae. Daniel?
Good morning, everyone. This is Daniel Holmesy checking in from the City and County of San Francisco, and it is an honor to be here with all of you this morning. And we're really excited about the chance to catch up with all of you and share some of the important work that's going on here in San Francisco as well.
I'm going to go grab two vests.
Great. Thanks, Daniel. Okay, everybody. We have a great agenda for you today, so we'll briefly go through this. We're going to do our ECA Bay Area update. Then we have our disaster preparedness in the COVID-19 environment with disabilities, access, and functional needs focus. Activating and engaging CERT teams. We're also going to talk about securing your space. Now that we've all had this time to be at home, we hope you're all securing your space. And the Earthquake Country Alliance statewide update. And then we have a fantastic presentation on emergency management during COVID-19 pandemic, lessons learned for future shocks from our San Francisco Department of Emergency Management. So we look forward to a full packed agenda. Just a reminder, if you have questions, again, use the Q&A feature. And we also have the chat box. But for questions, please, if you could use your Q&A function, that would be great. Next slide. So briefly, many of you have heard this before, but maybe we have new folks joining us today, which would be great. The Earthquake Country Alliance was created in 2003 in Southern California and expanded statewide in 2009 after the first shakeout event. It's a coordination and collaboration of 1,500 plus public, private, and grassroots leaders. We have statewide sector-based committees to help develop resources and programs throughout the state. We have regional alliances organizing local events, outreach campaigns, media events based around shakeout and other activities that we do, Tsunami Week, and support provided by the California's Office of Emergency Services. More information, you can go to our earthquakecountry.org website. For our Bay Area activities, coordination, networking, and resource development are our key areas. And of course, right now we're missing that networking and in-person component for all of us. Our regional workshops, again, this is our first virtual workshop, so welcome again, everybody. and our Shakeout and Tsunami Preparedness Weeks. So for more information, shakeout.org/California and tsunamizone.org/California. So another thing that we do with ECA is we have annual mini awards. So this year's 2020 ECA mini awards, purpose for associates to improve earthquake resilience, promote awareness and preparedness, and multiply the impact of our programs. Priority is given to proposals for mitigation activities. Other earthquake preparedness activities can also be proposed. And the awards are $500 packages of materials that are provided via catalog or other items can also be proposed for your campaigns. Whoops, I think there we go. So we asked some questions during the registration process. So we're gonna briefly go over those. So the first question was, how might COVID conditions affect your response if a damaging earthquake occurred now? So always out of the gate, the ability to contact older neighbors, especially mobility challenged, unable to have congregable shelters. Our CERTs would have to practice social distancing for search and rescue, limited resources to assess and treat damage to archival, and mass evacuations with social physical distancing may become an issue, and limited staff and resources to respond to and support our incident command system response, and virtual EOC and sheltering limitations, financial hardships, and town and residents. So how have your utilized community preparedness groups connect with neighbors? Neighborhood mutual assistance, grassroots programs, used our neighborhood mailing list to contact people, used Google Groups to contact neighbors, block action teams, nextdoor.com. Let's see, we went to the next question, that's okay. Which items in your preparedness kit have come most in handy during COVID-19? And what items will you add now? So definitely the PPEs, right? Masks, that was one of the first things we all went digging for in our kits. Get out those masks. Food and lots of toilet paper, definitely. Paper towels and toilet paper are high on that list. CERT member roster to contact other members, hand sanitizer. And the last one, let's see. Which services did you find most important during the pandemic, and which closed services did you miss? So local and state information and briefings, Santa Clara County dashboard, mail services, power and cable services, waters, utilities, senior center and recreation program provided food, which helped deliver, scientific expertise, public and health officials, and those that you miss the most, the barber, the hairdresser, missing routine medical services, miss working in the office, and miss restaurants and dining out. I particularly miss my nails. So now moving on, we're gonna hear from Roxann Crawford from FEMA and COVID-19 as a teachable moment for disabilities, access, and functional needs in earthquake preparedness. Roxann, take it away.
Can you see me? Hi, good morning. Roxann Crawford, disaster preparedness in the COVID environment. I've been with FEMA for almost 15 years, and I am currently the Disability Integration Specialist for FEMA's Region 9. That covers the states of California, Arizona, Nevada, Hawaii, and all the Pacific territories, including American Samoa, Guam, and Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands. So we're going to talk a little bit about disaster preparedness in the COVID environment. And what's so interesting is that it's really not that much different from disaster preparedness always. You know, we're really covering the same thing. Some of the major changes really are that it's just so much more vital that these things happen because there's just less certainty about how things are going to go. I'm trying to control the screen and did it go? Sorry. There it goes. Okay. Disasters can happen anywhere, anytime. Reports have found that almost half of all Americans, 150 million people, are threatened by shaking from earthquakes strong enough to cause damage. Definitely not trying to scare anybody, but planning, the best ideas are to plan for all possibilities. Know the risks in your area. Ask for updated plans regarding sheltering and evacuation in the COVID environment from your local emergency management officials, and be prepared. It all comes down to you in the immediate aftermath of a large event. We always tell my mom, my grandparents, yo-yo, you're on your own. And you can't really count on anyone to help you when things get truly intense. We can hope that cities and other municipalities plan and prepare, and they are, but it's not a guarantee. I am trying to control the slides, Mark, but it's not moving, and I'm not sure why. There we go. Okay, I'll just tell you next. A basic truth. Daily averages in US communities, there's only one firefighter for every 265 people, one law enforcement officer to every 334 people, and one medical paramedic or EMT to every 325 people. You may think because you have a disability or are older that the rescue people will come for you first, but the reality is that there are very few first responders for the population. Most places have too many people to truly have a prioritized system for response, plus all the variables of large disasters, something like a Big Bay area or a Los Angeles area earthquake. There just won't be the resources necessary to attend to all people in an organized and prioritized fashion. So again, that means that you need to be the person to plan for you and to make sure that you have what you need to be safe in the immediate aftermath of a large event. Next slide. So what's different in COVID times? At this time, with the concerns related to COVID-19, there won't be things like congregate sheltering, where everybody stays together in a large room or like a high school or fairgrounds. There won't be mass evacuation without concern for social distancing. And what does that mean to you as a person for preparing for disasters? It means that you need to have a plan in place and that you need to have backups for your plan because there's so much uncertainty. If you're a person who takes public transportation, do you have people in your life who can assist you? Do you have a plan for that public transportation? Do you know what the city's plan for that public transportation is? It's important to ask those questions to get some answers and get them down on paper. And I'm going to give you some great resources for how you could kind of track those things on some of the forward slides. Thank you. How to prepare for emergencies. So, I mean, some of the basics are just to use the resources available to you from FEMA and from local and regional organizations, such as the Earthquake Country Alliance. Pacific ADA has a ton of great stuff. I've got some links on some slides coming up. And other local organizations. I'm gonna break it down for you. So we'll just go to the next slide. FEMA's got some great resources. Ready.gov has everything from checklists and information to actual trifolds, flyers. They have a breakdown of specific information too. You can get information for people with disabilities. You can get a brochure called Preparing Makes Sense for Older Americans. They have information on how to prepare for and plan for your pets, including checklists and ideas of things you might be able to use in order to make sure that those things are ready. We also have the FEMA app. That app you could download to your phone. It's got great resources on it, both for preparedness and for during a disaster. I found it to be really helpful during an event, and having it pre-downloaded just means that you have it available to you. You can get weather alerts in up to 5 different counties. I love that because I can get weather alerts for myself and for family members who are, far away. There's also, during a disaster, it can link you to sheltering options. It can link you to directly to FEMA for you to follow up or find out how an individual assistance application is going, things like that. And then there's also the FEMA social media accounts. They do a lot of mirroring and magnifying information from local government organizations, emergency management, with very specific instructions and things to keep you safe, information about events or changes in practices or current response stuff. Okay, next slide. I included these Pacific ADA resources, Pacific ADA Center resources, because I just think they're fantastic. There's no need to reinvent the wheel when somebody's done such a great job of building these for you. So they have all these kit lists and emergency contact lists and things that are already prepared, and all you have to do is fill them out, print them, and keep them with you. For the kit list, they just have a ton of great ideas. Sometimes it's really hard to think of the things that you're going to need. So knowing that somebody's already done that work for you and kind of run it through different community partners, it's important. A lot of people think of an emergency kit as just this one thing at your house, but I don't know about you, I'm not always at my house. So there's a bunch of different kits. So there's a keep it with you or a carry-on kit. It's essential items you need to keep with you at all times. So if you have an inhaler or emergency medication, that's something that you should have with you at all times, right? I keep emergency contact lists, you know, just some water. I always have some water. I have a water filtration system in my vehicle. So just the things that you always keep with you. A grab and go kit is an easy to carry kit you can grab if you have to leave home in a hurry. It has things you can't do without, but are not so big or heavy that you can't carry them. That's maybe more like a backpack size. The home kit's the big one that everybody thinks of when you talk about being prepared or having a preparedness kit. That would include things like food, water, first aid supplies, clothing, bedding, tools, emergency supplies, disability specific items, durable medical equipment if you have those things. It includes all the things you'd mostly need if you had to be self-sufficient for a number of days, either at home or at an evacuation center. In this kind of different environment where we usually talk about what would you need at a shelter, it might be talking about what you need at a hotel environment. And that environment could be very different. If you need personal care attendant services, if you have information that you would need to share with emergency management professionals or people who are assigning you to a hotel room or something like that about things that you would need, if you need access to cooking, stuff like that, access to an accessible room, what types of things would you need to have with you? That home kit would also be your hotel kit. A bedside kit has items you would need if you were trapped in or near your bed and unable to get to other parts of your home. So, I mean, make sure you're securing all the things in your home, like Dita said earlier, but just in case something goes awry and you end up trapped at your bed, always just keep those few items right near you. And there's a link there where you can see what those are, water and other things. And a car kit has items that you would need to evacuate an area or that you would need with you if you were in your vehicle during an emergency. I have things like an emergency blanket, my water filtration system in case I get trapped somewhere, things like that. Oh, I see a question. Are Pacific ADA resources available in other languages? I believe that they are. I can follow up on that. As soon as I'm done presenting and someone else goes, I'll follow up on it and get an answer back to Sharon. Okay, next page. Does the ADA website have pre-created social and creative content? This is really like basic lists and information. Their website does have a lot of great things. They do have some updated COVID-19 information for people with disabilities and access and functional needs. I would recommend going to the website and giving a little peruse around. Again, I can go look. I'm not with Pacific ADA, I'm with FEMA, but I do work closely with Lewis Krause and Jan at the Pacific ADA, and I've just found their tools to be really effective. So we talked about the food and water checklist. There's a power planning checklist if you're an individual who's power dependent, I would go ahead and look at that power planning checklist and see what type of things there are needed there. Emergency travel safety tips for overnight stays, just a helpful link. You never know where you might end up at. And the evacuation transportation planning checklist. I think that's really one of the key ones during this COVID environment, is just knowing if you rely on public transportation, how you're going to get public transportation. Next slide. Emergency contact list. This is like the #1 big guy right now in the COVID-19 kind of situation we find ourselves in. This emergency contact list could be your link to outside world during a large event. The list contains contacts in priority order, who you should try to reach first, second, etc. You want to include local and out of the area contacts on this list in case you need to evacuate the area entirely for your safety. Is there somebody who can assist you or somewhere that you can go on that list? Keep a hard copy of the list and if possible, enter it into your cell phone. I always take that a step further. I keep one in the glove box of my car. I keep a printed copy at home with my emergency kit. I also keep a copy on my phone and iPads. But in addition, I take a picture of my hard copy list and load it to Google Photos or to another platform that has like the cloud so that you can access it anytime. And give everyone on your list a copy of the list along with instructions on how to use it. You never know who will need to get a hold of who else on that list in order to try to assist you. It's so that you can let people know you're safe or that you need help. Remember that you want to keep phone numbers and emails on the list because you may not be able to make a phone call. You may only be able to do a text or an email from a hardline computer somewhere. So just make sure you have lots of different contact options and you update the list at least once a year. Next. So some important items to gather. We're going to kind of go through this list pretty quick. It's self-explanatory. Emergency health information, prescriptions and medications, other items you need for surviving. I mean, basic, your personal survival, if you need tubing for suction, oxygen tubing, electricity, those types of things. Cell phone, cell charger, flashlights and extra batteries for oxygen, breathing devices, hearing aids, cochlear implants, radios, emergency food and water. Next. Sorted sizes of reclosables, plastic bags for storing food and waste. This is also important in this COVID environment, is having something that you're able to store potentially contaminated items in that you're not willing to discard, just to ensure that they're not contaminating other things. Sturdy work gloves to protect your hands, also important for earthquake country, glass breaks and things like that. Do you have a way to kind of clean up or get yourself around? Small battery operated radio, a signaling device you can use to draw attention to you if you need emergency assistance, something like a whistle, a horn, a beeper, bell, screecher, alarm system. Other items to gather, a container that can be attached to the bed or nightstand, road flares. I know that sounds weird, but Google it. Blankets or emergency blankets, tools, first aid kit and first aid book, battery jumper cables, a reflective vest, rain poncho, and state and local maps. I know it seems silly to have maps. People don't use maps anymore. We just kind of blindly follow our phones, or at least I do. But it's actually a really good idea to have those maps available to you in case you don't have access to cellular service or data past an event. COVID-related items to gather, face coverings for personal protection, or if not able to wear face coverings due to disability, having a plan to communicate that and making sure that you are remaining safe and managing that social distance. Disinfectant wipes, hand sanitizers, gloves, plastic bags or garbage bags or contaminant, potentially for containment of potentially contaminated items. And foods that don't require electricity to prepare or won't require shopping or delivery. You may need to, I'm just going to go through a couple other things. Wheelchair user considerations: keep needed equipment close to you and secured so you can get to it quickly. Recharging devices that can be connected to a vehicle and for an emergency charge, or if available, keep a lightweight manual wheelchair for backup. Next slide. Speech or communication considerations. If you use a laptop computer for communication, consider getting a power converter that plugs into a cigarette lighter of a vehicle. Maintain old versions of communication devices if possible, including printed communication boards and pictograms to assist in the case of no electricity to charge communication devices. When you upgrade your equipment, just maybe hold on to some of the older equipment so that you can keep it in your Go kit. Next page. Oh, sorry, I got two of those. Deaf or hard of hearing considerations. Carry a pre-printed copy of key phrase messages with you. Things like, I use American Sign Language. I do not read or write English well. If you make announcements, I'll need to have them written simply or signed. And consider getting a weather radio with a visual text display that warns of weather emergencies, or get applications on your smartphones or other mobile wireless devices. Vision considerations. Mark your disaster supplies with fluorescent tape, large print, or braille. And if possible, have printed information with simple requests for things you know you'll need access to. Just letting people know how they can best serve you or provide access. Sensitivities and breathing conditions considerations. This could also potentially be big in the COVID environment. Make sure that you have towels, masks, industrial respirators, or other supplies you could use to filter your air supply, and an N95 rated particulate filter mask. I know these are really hard to get right now, but it's something to keep on your list. And when you're able to get one, or more than one to keep in your kit, it's a really good idea, especially if we have fire season. They're really great for protecting from smoke inhalation and other things. You are your best resource in a disaster. Take the time to prepare and make a plan. Test your plan and talk about it with the people in your life. Make sure that you contact neighbors and directly close people. Know who your neighbors are, because they're one of your best resources in the event of a large disaster. If you can't reach out, if you can't call, text, email, who do you have that's already close to you who may be able to assist you if you need help? And do your homework. Know what your risks are, and how to respond to those risks will change during the COVID environment. Thank you. I can look it up. Are there any questions?
Roxann, we have a question from Keith May.
Okay.
Can you give a few suggestions for devices that can charge a wheelchair and can be plugged into a vehicle?
Keith, I can look that up and try to get it over to Sharon before the end of this so they can add it to the presenting list.
We have a question from Stephen. I use a CPAP at night for sleep apnea. It's hard to carry the machine with me in case of an emergency. What is the best way to prepare?
You know, the best way to prepare is to find a good case or a carrying thing for it, because really, if you're relying on someone else to have another machine or for you to have access to that machine, they may not. And given a large event, there's likely going to be acute injuries and people who need the hospital rooms and beds. You know, prepare for a shelter at home if at all possible. That's probably the best advice. But, you know, I would look at wheeled dolly type suitcase or container that would make it easier to transport the machine.
Is there a link for Pacific ADA resources? This question is from Lori.
Yes, I put the links in the slides, and I'll make sure to send it to Sharon as well so that it can get sent out if needed, but it is in the slides.
A question from Bruce. How can we best make this information available to the rest of our community?
I would highly recommend spreading the word to visit FEMA's ready.gov page and to visit the Pacific ADA website and the Earthquake Country Alliance websites. So a lot of great information out there. We do our very best to continue to advertise these availability of information through local emergency management, through local disability organizations, and through our partners in other organizations that serve individuals with disabilities, access and functional needs, and groups like Earthquake Country Alliance. We were all together at the Abilities Expo, giving out preparedness information, lists, checklists, brochures, and encouraging people to be prepared. So we're doing our best to get the information out in the community. I think the best thing that you can do is, if you think it's good information, share the link on your social media pages and look for it coming from local emergency management as well.
Terrific. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you, Roxann. Always wonderful to hear from you. And next, we have Dave Cosgrave from the Coastside CERT. Dave, do you want to take it away?
Yeah, thank you very much. Very good presentation, Roxann. I just want to say that this week I had to jumpstart both my wife and daughter's car because they've been doing a good job on sheltering at home, and their cars hadn't started out and doing most of the activities. So I never thought about the jumper cables until you brought that one up, but I did need them twice this week. Okay, so I'm here today to talk about activated and engaging CERT members. I'm a battalion chief for Coastside Fire and CAL FIRE, but I'm also the trainer and coordinator for Coastside CERT. So there is a big difference between activating and engagement. And let me see if I've got control or not. Not yet. You want to go to the next one? Oh, hold on. Let me try it. Okay. So CERT members. Who are the CERT members? ECA and CERT are kind of closely related. All the things we just covered about preparedness is like a basic night that we have with CERT. So we've covered a lot of that. I won't cover that, but our CERT members range from high school students taking teen CERT up to people in senior community and everything in between, every education level from high school diploma or less to doctors. So we always have to be careful. And keeping them motivated, they are volunteers. They spend their time. We do get motivation by disasters and events. Just had that earthquake of 6.5 in Nevada, which gets people interested in getting earthquake awareness. And what we try to do is give them the knowledge and the skills and ability to deal with anything. So we give them tools for their toolbox. We talk about the different disasters that can happen, and it kind of frightens them, but then we give them a process to work from there with the unknowns, right? We give them a place to start and a toolbox so that they can keep going from that. As far as sponsoring the agency or the authority, there's a big difference with that. Some cities are all inclusive, where the fire department, the police department, the health department, they're all in one. I'm a special district, so I'm only the fire district here in Coastside Fire. So we don't have the authority to declare an emergency. We're a special district. So to get coverage for our volunteers, we have to get disaster service worker, and that was a difficult thing to do, not be in a city or a county. So that's a whole topic that could take lots of time, and I'll cover a little bit about that in the next slide. But the CERT mission is basically to help out when there's a declared emergency with the activation plan that for the SOPs of your organization. You have to stay within the scope of your training and your activation. So that gets us into activating for a public health emergency. We really can't see that little fancy little germ that it shows there, but if I see one of those, I'm going to swat them. So there is a hard part to do when it comes to engagement for this health emergency. So engagement is the key though, so we'll get into that. All right, so when I mentioned the disaster volunteer classifications, in order to be a disaster service worker, it's a relic of World War II where it was the war councils. Now they're called disaster councils. And basically it gives a minimum workers' comp insurance to anybody that is going to assist, that has the training and an official capacity. So they can be any of these classifications. It could be animal care and rescue, communications, obviously the CERT team, the community emergency response team, emergency operations and ICS, so working in an operating center, fire, human services. I put these in red because it could be a labor or law enforcement, but that's real tricky to do. Logistics, medical and environmental health, safety and programs, and then you got search and rescue and utilities. So if you're certified in CERT and you go to help out someone in animal rescue, you would not be covered unless you were sworn in for the animal rescue as well. So that you have to be all those classifications. Then inside of that classification, you have to be within the scope of training. So the FEMA training for CERT is obviously disaster preparedness. And then I say disaster medical operations. It doesn't teach you how to take a swab of the nose. It doesn't teach you how to do advanced medical operations. It's mostly, we call them the killers for those that aren't involved in CERT. It's you know, airway, circulation, and shock, right? We're treating for the things that we can do. We're going to stop bleeding because there's no blood to give. So the emergency things you can do right there to keep somebody from getting worse. But advanced training is not there. We don't teach CPR. That's not one of the key concepts of CERT. We teach it later on. There's light search and rescue. There's disaster psychology, both for you, because that environment you're in is going to affect your psyche, and it's going to affect those that you treat. So it's a big part of it. Terrorism, I just added in their awareness because there's not much we're going to do. And then there's additional training you can do. You can have an animal response. There's leadership. There's crowd and traffic management. And that came out of the fires down in Southern California where CERT teams were activated to help do parking. Somebody got hurt and they found out it wasn't in their scope of training, so they were not covered by the DSW classification. And then there's a flood response, which is a limited, right? We're not going to get people into the water. And firefighter rehab, which we teach here, and it's firefighter and for ourselves, for the CERT team members to keep them activated. So try one. Mark, you have to move it forward unless it's just long. Okay, so this one's real busy. So when we're saying activation, an activation, you have to be trained for it. There has to be an official activation per your SOPs. Once we do that, once we ring that bell, we're responsible for, everybody has to be checked in. So there's an accountability. They have to have a safety briefing, and they have to be supervised the whole time. So for a CERT team to be activated, all these things are on that sponsoring agency, and all these things have their own set of circumstances that can be difficult to manage. So when we talk about activation, those are all the components that are involved in that. So what we're going to really talk about right now is the next slide. It's even busier. All right, so this would be kind of like the engagement, right? So we're in a new world. I'm on the Speakers Bureau for the Bay Area ECA, so I'm supposed to coordinate for speakers, but we're not having the events. So we're moving towards having to have, like we are right now, webinars. So we're having to do that. For engagement for our co-side CERT, we put out a newsletter. Every week we've been putting it out, and trying not to just regurgitate everything that's out there. I give a little bit of a personal effect about how I'm doing things, and we try to put links up for people that want more information. One thing to know about links is agencies do put up their links. Sometimes they change them, so it might not be the best thing. So you have to be careful with your links because they change those and then you send people off into oblivion. Social media, Facebook, and all those other things. So I've done everything from personal stories to I went and got, when I had my COVID test, I had it filmed and I put that up there online, which is, you can't click on that, but that's what's there. For keeping the CERT members here activated, right? We're not here for a public health emergency, but we started going through the California for All Volunteers and the governor's program for the neighborhood check-in. So we already have the network built with 32 neighborhoods. They already have a network to check in with some of the zone leaders. So we use that to branch out and use this program to have them check in on their neighborhoods. Also, non-sponsored opportunities. Several organizations here where we are doing lots of things. It's not a CERT activity, but we have the mailing list and all that to keep them involved. And with that, we send out the safety messages on how to keep volunteers safe and all that. So, and then again, we got the webinars like we're on right now and online learning. We have a second part of our webinar tonight. Instead of the Great Shakeout, we're preparing for the Great Shakeout in October. So my CERT team and others were having the Great Shake-In just to talk about it. Last week we had local USGS people talk about earthquakes and tsunamis specific to the San Mateo County coast and the Santa Cruz Mountains. So that was good. We had people turn in. And tonight we're going to go over 7 steps in the MyShake app. So that's good. Next one there. So now, thank you very much. And now stay away. And if we have any questions, I can start to read through them.
We do have a question. We have a question from Lori. She asks, I have a DSW card from CERT and the Medical Reserve Corp. I have no clue what I am approved to do. How does one find that out?
Okay, so whoever issued that card, right, they of those 9 criteria that they could check for, they were there. So it's all the organization that is doing the sponsoring has to officially activate you. You have to be within the training that you were given. So they'd have to go check back with those organizations. And also some organizations put expirations on them, so you might want to watch that. So whoever the sponsoring agency is, you'd have to check in with and what their standard operating procedures are. But you can look like the CERT criteria of what the training is. That's their medical reserve. That's above my level. So you can check to the medical reserve people and see what they've trained you to and what they would use.
Could you please define CERT?
CERT is the Community Emergency Response Team. It's a FEMA 20 to 24-hour training, and some programs go all the way from, you go through that program and you just use that for yourself to be prepared. You've gone through skills. We used to go through hands-on. We're gonna have to see how that works. So it's a lot of instruction. There is a required PowerPoints, but the key to it is putting those PowerPoints to work and working with other people to get tasks accomplished. And then we have people who become zone leaders, block captains, and we have neighborhoods that are conducting their own drills and training. So there's a wide variety of it, but it's a FEMA program for emergency response from citizen volunteers. Like Roxann said on one of her things, I think it was basic truths. We use the earthquake as an example here on the San Mateo County coast. We're not very far. We're about 30 minutes from San Francisco, 45 from San Jose. But when a big earthquake hits the region, we're going to be on our own, right? We have 3 fire engines here on the coast, 1 ambulance, 30,000 people. So those 30,000 people will be sheltered in place, and hopefully they have their emergency preparedness ready.
Stephen asks, because of COVID-19, will there be any kind of virtual CERT training?
Yeah, we're moving into that. I'm in the middle of, or actually I'm at the tail end of 2 CERT classes where we only have 1 more module left that I can do online. But the final exercise is what we have to plan on how we're going to do that and limit with social distancing. And we'll see as the health orders ease what we can do to morph that into getting people checked off on their skills.
Hannah asks, if a DSW does something outside of their training, they are not covered by DSW?
Right, it's just like Good Samaritan laws and all those things. If you go beyond the scope of your authority, you could be liable, yes.
And one last question from Monique. Are DSW cards only for those in your area or for all CERTs?
We require them here in our fire district for liability because we don't carry that insurance. Some agencies don't require it to have, but it's up to the sponsoring agency what level they want you to have. So if you don't have DSW coverage, you would still be covered by Good Samaritan volunteer laws.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Dave. You guys are doing great work on the coast side, and thank you for doing the most good for the most number of people.
We're trying.
Yes, and a lot of online stuff to come in the future because we're all trying to figure that one out. So
Yeah.
thanks so much, Dave, for sharing your program. That was great information, and I'd love to see your newsletter. So I'll grab you offline on that one.
CosciCert.com.
Got
Yeah.
it. So next, Mark Benthien is going to talk about Secure Your Space and our ECA statewide updates. Mark, take it away.
All right, hi everyone again, and thank you all for your participation this morning. I see we've had nearly 350 people here with us, and normally our in-person workshops we might have maybe 80 to 100, so this is allowing us to reach more of you. We really appreciate all your questions. I'm going to talk now a little bit about Earthquake Country Alliance and the activities and resources it has statewide, and also particularly some messaging that some actions that you can take right now, even today in your home, to make yourself, your space more secure in case an earthquake were to happen, so that you'd be safe at home or even safer at home while you're safe at home. We already heard a little bit earlier, if you've joined later, Earthquake Country Alliance is a statewide organization. We have lots of opportunities for you to participate in the Bay Area with our activities, as well as on statewide sector-based committees that you'll see in a little bit. But I'm going to start with the 7 steps to earthquake safety. These are really what to do before, during, and after an earthquake so that you are prepared to survive and recover. And you can find these at earthquakecountry.org/7 steps. And the first step we actually put as kind of for earthquakes, a really important aspect is to secure your space so that things don't fall or fly at you during an earthquake. And so you want to identify those hazards, move them or secure them, and this is going to reduce injuries and potential damage. And there's a lot of information on our website, again, earthquakecountry.org/step1. So this is securing your top heavy furniture so that you don't have everything fall, break, or hit people or the furniture itself. You want to use a flexible nylon strap, and there's a variety of resources for that at home improvement stores, online, that you can buy. And there's different types. Some have buckles, some have Velcro. You also want to secure your TVs and electronics. Just imagine how thin and big our TVs have gotten and how easy they are to fall just with a slight nudge. Imagine during an earthquake how they might fall. And there are a variety of materials and resources, straps of different types that you can use. And if you can, bolt that TV to the wall with those type of mounting plates, that's even better. Your wall hangings you want to secure so that pictures and other items won't fall off, especially if it has glass. Look for closed hooks that you can use, and there's a variety of ways of doing that too. Smaller items can be secured with earthquake putty, quake hold putty, or museum wax, and it's remarkably effective in especially your more smaller to average earthquakes. Maybe not the biggest earthquake, but it will prevent these things from falling. Again, I didn't do that. Again, if there are other things that might bump them, as well as earthquakes. And then your kitchen cabinets, you want to prevent the mess that you might have, as well as all the broken glass, the broken food containers, and beverages that you would lose. That would be very helpful after an earthquake. And there are a variety of ways that you can secure your upper cabinets. In a way, you might secure the lower cabinets for child safety. You're securing the upper cabinets with different types of latches that are available for earthquake safety. And then, of course, very important, you want to secure your gas appliances and large appliances, especially your water heater, securing it the correct way. You should see 2 straps around it, bolted into the wall behind the water heater. You want to secure other gas appliances with connect them with flexible steel or stainless steel gas connectors. All of these things are really important. You don't want your refrigerator to tip forward and spill everything out. So you want to keep everything in there. Even if the power goes out, it will act like a cooler and things will be okay for a day or two. So just to summarize this very quick overview of these actions, really something you can do right now right after this webinar is to move something that's heavy to a lower location, so that if it were to fall and hit you or fly across the room, it would you could avoid that even if the earthquake were later today. We have a lot of great advice at earthquakecountry.org/step1. And most of this is things you can do in one weekend. You can work with your when you can with people that can help you. Maybe that's with who you're sheltering with right now.
Hi guys.
And
Hi. Someone just dropped these off. I don't know if I'm
just
just
one
copying.
second. Okay. And also coming up, look for an email about a Secure Your Space webinar coming up on June 11th. So that will kind of go into this with a lot more detail and instructions. We'll have live demonstrations of how to do some of these actions. All right. So that's the first step of this 7 steps to earthquake safety. I'm not going to go through all of the rest here, but just to let you know that these are available there. Really great resources for to let other people know too what you can do to be prepared to survive and recover. Our statewide activities, of course, are developing these resources in both English and Spanish at terremotos.org. Earthquakecountry.org, of course, our English webpage. We support Tsunami Preparedness Week with a website called tsunamizone.org, which is very similar to the Shakeout website for practicing earthquake drills and other earthquake preparedness activities associated with those drills. Shakeout.org and /California is the Great California Shakeout website. We do have materials called Staying Safe Where the Earth Shakes that you can download from our website too. And sorry, just one second. I am to take care of something. Okay. And we have 10 regional versions. There's a Bay Area version there of this booklet that you can download, and as well as the statewide versions in English and Spanish and Chinese. Now, I mentioned the committees that we have. We have these groups that are working together to develop resources, particularly for these audiences. And if you'd like to participate, please email bayarea@earthquakecountry.org if you would like to be a part of any of these committees to help create resources that might be of use to you as well as to others in your sector. One of our really successful committees is our Seniors and People with Disabilities, and they've developed a variety of resources that you can find at earthquakecountry.org/disability. And a very important aspect of those resources that they have worked to create in partnership with the Pacific ADA Center is what to do during an earthquake. Of course, if possible, we recommend that you drop where you are, cover your head and neck, and so you're protecting yourself from things that might be falling. And if you can crawl to a nearby shelter, desk, or table to get under for additional protection, do so and then hold on to that during the earthquake. If you can't get down and get back up again, we encourage you to either to stay seated where you are, cover your head and neck, or if you use a cane to try to, if you can get down, bring that cane with you. If you use a walker or a wheelchair, we change the messaging to lock, cover, and hold on. Lock if you have a lock for your wheels, and cover, then sit and cover your head and neck. If you have something you can hold over you, even better. Again, earthquakecountry.org/disability is where you can find that graphic and those resources. I mentioned Shakeout. Last year, we had 10.8 million participants in California. We're not expecting to have that many this year. We really are looking to see how life's going to be in October, and we're adapting our message. We want people perhaps to consider doing distributed drills, a workplace or a school who are not all together. Perhaps people could be drilling in their homes, and how would they kind of manage that would be a really interesting plan, because of course you're not always together in the workplace or at school when the earthquake happens, but that's where a lot of people are practicing drills. So we want to encourage more home drills where people identify the hazards in their home and where they want to be safe and how to practice that type of self-protective action. This year, the International Shakeout Day is October 15th. We also have a lot of videos on how to protect yourself that show these actions. And you can find that on our webpage at shakeup.org/messaging, and also on YouTube at youtube.com/greatshakeout. So before we turn over at 11 to our next speaker, are there some questions?
There are. One question is, what should be the message to renters who are seen as damaging the property if they secure larger appliances?
Yeah, we often hear this, that people are putting holes in their walls and they're getting in trouble. And really, I think that's short-sighted on the landlord's part. Of course, how you have that conversation with the landlord is part of what how your relationship is. But they want to keep you. They want to keep you there. They want to keep you paying rent. They should allow you to be securing your space. You know, typically, as long as you will agree to cover over those holes when you leave, hopefully they will be okay. I encourage landlords, when I speak to apartment owners and other groups, to provide these resources to their tenants, even to encourage them to secure their space. Again, we want them to be safe, not get injured, and to be able to continue to live there.
We have a question from Karen. Do you recommend keeping cash at home? And also, what about your gas tank on your vehicle?
Yeah, I certainly didn't go into all the levels of preparedness in the 7 steps. These are part of the recommendations that we have, like in step 3 in your supplies and your plan, which is step 2, you know, that ATMs may not have power, therefore you may not be able to get money out. So having small bills, 1s and 5s, you know, as much as you can in a safe place, will enable you to have those, and to buy a bottle of water for $1 or $2 or $5 rather than using your $20 bill and maybe not being able to get change. So those types of factors are really good while you want to have some small bills saved up. You know, when you get $1 or $2 here and there, just kind of stash that away.
How do you recommend preparing children for an emergency?
So you want to have these conversations about in emergencies, but also in earthquakes in particular. It is about practicing your plan and involving them in your plan. You know, depending on the age level, you want to adapt that. But we have guidance on earthquakecountry.org and on shakeout.org for what parents can do with children as young as 2 years old. There are conversations you can have. You may not talk about it as an earthquake, but we have activities that people use that kind of make it fun. We talk about bunny in the hole, or the bear in the cave, where you practice and you say, okay, bunny in the hole, you're getting safe from the big bad wolf, or something like that. And then they learn that, and you say that if everything starts to shake because the wolf is coming, get in your hole. And so you're practicing that safe space. They do this in daycare and child care centers, and you can do that at home too. But overall, just engage your children in the conversation, help them put the kits together. That way they are part of the solution.
And just briefly, what do you use for water filtration?
You know, there are so many resources for filtration that you want to just look at what may work best for you, whether you have a tap filtration in your home or something you carry with you. Lots of different options.
And the last one, how often should you update your emergency plan?
Well, certainly you want to do it at least once a year, but you want to do it whenever you have a change in your situation, or new family members, or of course you've moved, new situations, so that you are always ready to go with your current situation.
Thank you.
Okay, so let me just.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mark, so much. It's always good to hear. We learn every time we review this information, no matter how many times we've been through it, right? So appreciate especially the comments about if you have a situational change and updating your plan. Definitely we should all be updating our plans now, because this latest has really changed a lot for us all, as we have learned. And speaking of lessons learned. Now we have Mary Ellen Carroll from the San Francisco Department of Emergency Management. Mary Ellen, are you with us?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Wonderful. We can.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry I interrupted the meeting. I was
Oh.
not on mute when I first jumped on. My
No
apologies
worries.
earlier.
No worries. We're excited to hear about some of these lessons learned from San Francisco. And I'll have to say, just on a personal note, I have really appreciated the engagement and involvement, especially from our Bay Area Joint Information System calls and Jonathan. And so we really all learn a lot from everybody's experiences. So thank you so much for coming on today and sharing with everybody. This is our first virtual webinar and workshop for our Bay Area Regional Earthquake Country Alliance. So welcome, and take it away, Mary Ellen.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much for having me. I'm speaking to you today from our Emergency Operations Center, which is at Moscone Convention Center South. And you can see behind me the carpet here in like this really odd, sort of ironic turn of events. The carpet at the Moscone looks like the COVID-19 virus. So in case we forget while we're here, we just look down. It's very weird. So I was just asked to talk to you, kind of update you on what's going on with our response. And so I just have a few notes to share with you. You know, essentially what we're doing is the most massive shelter in place that we've ever done or probably imagined. And that could be something that, you know, would happen after an earthquake also. Some of the things that we've learned from the situation are, one is that our earthquake planning certainly has helped us be prepared and to be able to respond to this, and in a number of ways. In particular, our relationship with our Department of Public Health, as this is primarily obviously a public health emergency. This is a public health emergency dealing with a global pandemic. And over the last few years, we've really worked quite closely with our Department of Public Health partners, especially in the areas of like climate-related, weather-related emergencies, whether it's fire, heat, and air quality. So to your point about the communication, of course, we are approaching where we have, at least up to now, our response from a regional perspective. And so the regional health officers in the Bay Area have worked very closely together, and we've pretty much moved in lockstep from the beginning. And so those are relationships that were already established and that we have been, you know, working on for some time now. So that really helped us. You know, the other thing is, you know, from a shelter in place, you know, what are the things that, and sort of thinking about like post-earthquake, what are the things that are most common? So feeding and food is huge. So we've been, one of the first units that we stood up in operations was our feeding unit. And we've been feeding a lot of people for quite some time. I heard essentially we've had to up our feeding by 40% based on above what we were really doing as far as feeding vulnerable folks. And that's not only, so there's a number of different categories of that. One is already all the folks that already had food insecurity, and so that we were already working with many people who got their food in congregate settings, for instance, like either in group homes, but also in our senior centers and that sort of thing. And that couldn't happen anymore. So we had to move to a, you know, pre-packaged meal type delivery service. In addition, we had to develop a feeding program for people who are in isolation and quarantine. And then the two other categories are street homeless. So what happened when everything shut down is for a lot of people, their sources of food also shut down. While some feeding operations continued, other ways homeless people get their food is from restaurants and people, you know, handing out leftovers, and that all came to a screeching halt. So we had to develop a food outreach and delivery program for street homeless. And then finally, all the newly food insecure that perhaps were not in the past, but are now due to job loss or what have you. So that has been a huge operation. You know, related to, and then most of the other things, you know, I would say that the theme is really our vulnerable population. So we know that in an emergency that only magnifies the problem. People who are vulnerable become much more vulnerable after an emergency, and we certainly have seen that in this pandemic situation. We've had a huge spike in homeless people who are unhoused on the street, and that is in part because we had to stop allowing entrance into shelters in order to start thinning them. So congregate settings being thinned, and that started in early March. There really hasn't been an outlet for folks who are street homeless, people who are living on the street unhoused. And then finally, in that area, I'm sure everyone has heard about the hotel rooms that we have procured, but those primarily have been for folks who are for isolation and quarantine, and people who qualify from the particularly vulnerable populations to COVID-19. So in our case, we've defined that as over 60 and with an underlying medical condition. And then, you know, I think we've also seen that vulnerable also can be getting information out to folks in different languages. Also, for instance, seniors in general aren't on, I mean, generally speaking, this doesn't apply to everyone, but they're not the ones that are on social media all day long and scrolling through Twitter. Not everyone understands or uses those means. So our Joint Information Center has been on this, honestly, since the beginning of January. Because in the beginning, it was really just providing information about dispelling myths, providing information, and trying to mitigate some negative impacts on our Asian community here that were quite terrible and actually still continue. And because of the origins of the disease, even though it is not a race-based disease. Unfortunately, that narrative continues, unfortunately, from some of our leaders at the federal level, which doesn't help. And so right now we are, you know, within San Francisco, we are so pleased that to report that our curve has not only flattened, but it's starting to go down. And so therefore we are starting to move forward with some reopening. We arrived here only because of, you know, the great leadership from our Department of Public Health and our mayor, but also just everyone in San Francisco doing their part in heeding the health orders. And so we're very fortunate there. Of course, there's been other types of casualties in this situation, which are people so many people who have lost their jobs, people who have lost their businesses, not to mention just the sort of real and psychological and emotional wounds that continue to happen. People who are my son is graduating next month from UC Santa Barbara. I'm super proud of him, but you know, he won't have the graduation, and you know, that's just there's many examples of that, and not to mention just the hardship of not being able to be with people, and you know, it's been very hard, basically. One of the interesting things I think about this scenario that is we don't have a template for, and that we are creating as we go, is that for an earthquake, you know, you have a pretty clear response period, and then you move into restoration and then recovery. In this scenario, these three things are in parallel. So we anticipate that the response phase of this pandemic will go on for the next 1 to 2 years. At the same time, we have to do our recovery activities and start thinking about recovery, but also the reopening. And so it's not anything that we necessarily managed before, and it is complicated. We have to do these things in parallel, but they also have to be coordinated and connected. And so that this part I find very fascinating and challenging, and anxiety provoking, quite frankly. So, you know, while our curve is down and numbers are going down, and at the same time, we're still building our ability to test, build up our testing to where it needs to be, our tracing, our contact tracing, and our surveillance. And at the same time, put out health orders that we hope are clear, that are helpful, but that are iterative, and also that we need people to comply with other things. So even as we open, we still have to social distance, we still have to wear our masks, and all of those things. And so this is going to be, you know, a huge challenge. And then, you know, how do we prepare for that second wave, or in the words, the language of earthquakes, really the aftershock that potentially could come this fall, or even more further out. And so those are really kind of the overarching themes that we have going. I mean, it's just been it's been the challenge of all of our lives, obviously. There's other issues like that I could talk for hours about logistics and supply, which is a really big deal and continues to be. You know, we always thought in the beginning of this, I was joking that we thought fuel would be the thing that brings us down after an earthquake. And with this, I was like, oh my God, it's going to be hand sanitizer. Like we're all going to go down because we don't have enough hand sanitizer. So anyway, thankfully, people are making hand sanitizer, so we're able to continue. But it's been, you know, it's been really an incredible experience and incredibly exhausting. There's many of us, including myself, who haven't had a day off since February, really. And that's the other thing that we're really starting to look at is, you know, how do we, especially for emergency management and public health folks who have to be in this and who have already been in this, you know, we're in our 18th operational period, so that's 18 weeks. We've been here at Moscone for a little over 2 months, and to think that we may be at this for another year is pretty daunting. All the while trying to reopen our society and economy and everything else. So I think I'll stop there, and I'm happy to answer any questions anyone has.
I have a question for you from Hannah. How are or did you combat COVID-related racism?
Yeah, we continue to do it. I mean, in the beginning, that was very much our focus, was trying to explain to people what the disease was and what it wasn't, and who it affects and how you get it. And so a lot of education. And in fact, when we originally declared the emergency, there were many people who were unhappy about it because they felt like that would only exacerbate, you know, the effect of that kind of panic and negative actions toward our Asian community. Again, with education as much as we can. You know, we've had our leaders go out and speak to that, but we do still hear anecdotally from folks that, you know, there's still people that are experiencing, you know, that sort of like either people saying things to them or what have you as we move forward. And so we just continue to try to make sure that we're putting information out as much as we can, and you know, trying to support our neighbors and community members as best we can.
Thank you. I have a question for you from Michael. San Francisco Department of Emergency Management formally planning for how to respond to an earthquake event during COVID. If you're not, are you aware of if the state is doing this planning?
How to respond? Oh yeah, I mean, we are, I don't know about what the state is doing. And the only, I mean, the positive thing I can say, the optimistic thing then when people ask me this, which I get asked a lot, is like, well, at least we're all here in the room ready. So, you know, we will obviously proceed with a response to an earthquake by taking the actions that are going to benefit the most people and, you know, to save lives. And that may for a short period trump, you know, our other priorities. But that's what we'll have to do. And I am very concerned about going into the summer. Before COVID happened, we had been busy for the last year and a half with one thing after the other, especially related to weather related. It's also looking like fire season could be quite bad for us in Northern California. We have these, you know, if we're going to have a very hot summer and everyone's wearing masks, that's a whole other layer of challenge. So it is something that we're thinking of, and not only that, but also terrorist event. I mean, myself with my colleagues here in public safety, you know, we try to keep a buffer. I have people that that aren't here that are there and back at our main headquarters, and it's one of the things we're looking at now is sort of our sustainability plan. How do we continue to do this response, but, you know, peel off some folks so that we can be prepared for other things and actually continue to do some planning that we need to do that's not COVID.
I have a question for you from Laura. She was asking in regards to the point you were making about senior citizens being less likely to be on social media. How are you communicating with that population specifically?
Yeah, so we, from the beginning of this, we have been, you know, very focused on getting information out in every platform that you can imagine. So what we've learned is, you know, some people listen to the radio, some people watch the local news, others read their local neighborhood newspaper rather than the Chronicle, which is our newspaper here, plus social media. So we basically have, in the beginning started doing that and trying to hit every single platform we could to get information out, putting things up on the bus, you know, basically before it was the bus, our municipal transportation service that shut down. It's coming back now. But then we also, through our community, we have a very large community branch in our operations section. And so that branch is extremely active. They have been doing, it'd be interesting to get the numbers, the total numbers, but they do multiple webinars every week in order to do outreach to different populations on different subjects. And another strategy that we've used is to reach out to the community-based organization and the service providers that people are most close to. And so using them because they are trusted by people, they use the same language and they have the means to get information out to their kind of constituents or their clients, participants.
The next question I have is, what are your top lessons learned from this situation for when an earthquake happens?
That's a good question. Believe me, there have been times during this thing that I was like, why couldn't it have been an earthquake? Uh, I think in some ways this is very much more complicated. So relationships, I mean, a lot of the things I think we already know. Relationships and communication are so key. And when I say that, I mean within the city and among our city partners and our response partners. I would say second is that you know, you're vulnerable. You have to plan for your vulnerable populations because for the most part, you know, folks who have means and how homes and all that, they are able to sort of they come together, and you've got to plan for those that can't help themselves because it is a large group and it takes a lot of work. And I think thirdly, what I would say is I didn't prepare the answer to this question, so I'm just like pulling it off the top of my head. We're nowhere near after action, by the way, on COVID-19. So this is just random thoughts coming off the top of my head. I think the third thing is I just had it and I lost it. Vulnerable populations. Well, I would say that, oh, I know, community, that you cannot. This isn't a government response from my perspective. I mean, yes, it is, and in this case in particular, because health orders are certainly, you know, they're a government order. Thou shalt not leave your house, basically, which is kind of the most extreme, or only for certain things. But when it comes down to response, you've got to have you have to engage community. And I'm so grateful for the work of our team in the community branch. Doing that. And then the final thing I'll say is that we added in our EOC an equity branch, an equity officer in our management team. And that comes through our Human Rights Commission. And that has been an incredible addition and has really been helpful for us to look at everything we do through an equity lens to ensure that we're not leaving anyone out in our response and our plans.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Mary Ellen, for being with us and sharing. And I know it's not easy because we're still all in the middle of it, and learning as you go along. And even just talking about an after action report tickles me because we're like keeping that log going of, you know, heaven help us if we ever did have to go into it again, or hopefully not a second phase, you know, once we get to the fall. So I think that's part of what's all on that list. But, you know, charting what's lessons have learned for unprecedented territory. And again, just want to thank you for sharing, because it definitely helps hearing different emergency operations centers and emergency managers have that discussion, because that was one of our discussions weeks ago, is that we all feared is, what if something else happens while we're in the middle of this? You know, whether it's earthquake or not. And I know we're all on the threshold of the public safety power shutoffs again, and wildfire season, and the extreme weather is definitely you know, on our list with climate change, right? We have to do all this climate adaptation for our planning. So again, thank you.
And just one more thing just to add, I think, is when you think about earthquake, and then I'll leave you, I have to run off too, but the huge difference about this one is that in an earthquake, or, you know, we would assume that we would have help, that you can get resources, whether it's from the federal government or Southern California or other states. That has been so unique to this disaster that we have been 100% on our own, as is everyone. Like, there really isn't a lot of help or mutual aid or assistance. It's like it's a moot point. And I'm afraid that if we did have a major earthquake, you know, that would be one of the things that would be particularly a huge high risk for us is, you know, how much help would we get if it were to happen sometime during this pandemic crisis. So
I don't
trying
think
to
we
leave on a
data being activated all at the same time for this length of time, right?
right.
Well, thank you
Exactly.
again.
Anyway, thank you for having me.
Thank you, Mary Ellen. And now we'll open it up to our final question and answer. So let's see, Sharon, do you have some other questions for us from the group?
I do actually, and again, feel free to send your questions into the Q&A. One question that we have is self-care and mental health resources that you'd like to recommend, or specific approaches or tips that you've directly seen. And this is to all of our panelists.
There is a really good disaster psychology piece, and I think I saw somebody put a link up for it that you can also get through your CERT training components. So I know that's something that we're all looking at, is providing some of the virtual disaster psychology piece to folks. And it's hard, you know, you're wanting to, you know, do as much as normal. But that's really hard when everybody's working, going to school and staying and sheltering in place. I know that's been difficult for my family, as well as graduations, you know, and all the things for folks that have graduating children, you know, and just trying to keep it light and, you know, figure out what you can enjoy, whether it's a board game at night or, you know, you're having movie night, you know, just some certain things to keep everybody in good spirits, so to speak. So does any of the other panelists have any other suggestions or responses?
Dina, I just reposted a link that was shared earlier that may be relevant to that question.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Mark. All right, next question, Sharon.
This question is for Roxann. How do you spread greater mindfulness about accessible communication? What practices are you cultivating, like image descriptions, and any recommended resources to improve consistency in communications?
Am I off mute? There we
Yes.
go. Hey, everybody. You know, we work a lot with our external affairs team in FEMA specifically, related to communication access concerns and making sure that we're trying to reach everybody in a method that's most effective for them. You know, a lot of the things that we do is we work with local organizations and disability organizations, people that serve individuals with disabilities and individuals with disabilities themselves, to find out how they best want to receive information. You know, it can be really challenging. We always can do more. We can always do a better job. I would recommend looking into what organizations, again, serve individuals with disabilities, and talking with organizations like for the deaf and hard of hearing for those communication access points. We do recommend using multiple languages, multiple formats, captioning, American Sign Language interpreting, pictograms, things like that. I guess the best thing I can say is that we work with a team of professionals who are really adept at finding that information and making sure that they're getting to the biggest population within FEMA. So
Great, thank you, Roxann. And I know we work a lot with the Pacific ADA Center, and they've been fantastic, and you know, helping us do the icons and images for drop, cover, and hold with lock, cover, and hold. So if anybody ever has any suggestions or ideas along those lines, please let us know, because we do have such a magnificent access and networking component with the Earthquake Country Alliance in order to search those things out. And Mark and the team, Sharon, have been fantastic. Jason, with, you know, providing information and actually getting things accomplished that way. So strength in numbers, right? We're all stronger together, and especially during these times, just the support that we can give to one another and sharing our experiences and resources in itself really helps us and helps us with that disaster psychology piece, right? Just knowing that we have folks around us that can help and support us. And, you know, reaching out to our neighbors, whether it's through Nextdoor or through your CERT newsletters or however else you are doing those things, to continue to do that. So with that, I think, Mark, do you have any closing remarks?
Thank you, Dina, and thank you to all of our panelists and to all of our attendees for our first ECA Bay Area webinar. Thank you for putting up with any technical issues. I don't think we had too many, but also there have been a number of questions and comments about getting copies of the materials and the presentations and the links. We will be putting those all onto, including the recording, onto our website. We will be emailing you when that's available. It should be very, like in the next day or so here as we pull it all together. And someone asked if we'd be mailing hard copies. We won't be able to do that, but it will be available for you to review online or download and print yourself. And then also you can always reach us via statewide at info@earthquakecountry.org, and Bay Area specific questions for the ECA Bay Area at bayarea@earthquakecountry.org. And with that, we really appreciate all your participation. If you'd like to join Earthquake Country Alliance, also visit the website there or email us. Thank you, and the webinar is now complete.
Thank you, everybody. And thank you for all your comments and thank yous. Much appreciated. Stay safe and be well.